"Excuse me, but that seat is reserved for first-class passengers only," Mrs. Smith's voice rang out sharply, cutting through the hum of the airplane cabin. The air thickened with tension as she fixed her glare on Jordan, scrutinizing their every move. "Are you certain you're in the right place?" Jordan blinked, momentarily taken aback. "I have the right ticket," they replied, voice steady but laced with disbelief. A flurry of thoughts raced through their mind. Why was Mrs. Smith challenging their presence? "I'm going to need to see some identification," Mrs. Smith insisted, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. The moment stretched endlessly, and Jordan felt the weight of every pair of eyes around them. It wasn't just about the ticket, it felt like an assault on their identity. As the airplane ascended into the clouds, so did the surging tension within Jordan. They could feel it, a heavy blanket of bias suffocating the space between them and the other passengers. The gradual hum of the engines was drowned out by the pounding of their heartbeat. With each foot the plane gained in altitude, Jordan sensed the distance growing between their sense of belonging and the reality that stared back at them from the faces around. They tried to focus on the cloud-dotted horizon, but the unease crept in like a storm cloud, casting shadows on their thoughts. Jordan thought of their journey, years of hard work and determination. "I belong here," they whispered to themselves, clinging to shards of confidence. Yet all the while, Mrs. Smith's presence loomed large, amplifying their internal battle. For a fleeting moment, the cabin held its breath. Passengers reacted quietly, shifting in their seats, eyes darting away like startled birds, unwilling to engage. The silence enveloped Jordan. It was as if the entire airplane conspired to ignore the clash occurring right before them. Just then, Jordan caught a glimpse of a woman a few rows back, her gaze flickering between the commotion and her phone, ready to document the unfolding scene. It felt like betrayal. Seemingly compassionate, yet ultimately complicit in the tension filling the cabin. Will no one say anything? Jordan thought, their hearts sinking deeper. They felt isolated, a single drop in an ocean of indifference, left vulnerable in this escalating conflict. As the chaos swirled around them, a storm brewed within Jordan. Memories flooded back, recalling their childhood experiences with discrimination, the hurt, and the anger they thought they had put behind them. Images of past humiliations resurfaced like ghosts, accompanied by feelings of deep-seated frustration. "You've faced this before," they reminded themselves, clenching their fists, trying to summon the resolve that had buoyed them through countless injustices over the years. But this moment felt different, raw, public, and more challenging. "Not again," they whispered, a wave of humiliation cresting over them. Jordan grappled with the latent anger bubbling to the surface, urging them to explode or withdraw. Suddenly, a voice broke through the tension, "Hey! What's your problem?" A fellow passenger, a wiry man with determination in his eyes, had finally found his voice. Mrs. Smith turned toward him, incredulous. "This is an important matter, and so is not putting someone down for no reason," he interrupted, his voice firm, shaking the quiet. "Do you really think this is how you treat people?" The sudden shift in the atmosphere was palpable. Jordan's heart raced. Could someone actually be stepping up? The tension in the cabin began to crack, a thin thread of solidarity forming among the passengers, signaling the potential for allyship amidst the adversities. Stunned by the intervention, Jordan felt a flicker of hope ignite within them. Was this the moment they needed, the shift they had been yearning for? The realization that support could arise even in the most oppressive circumstances began to crystallize as they looked around at the gathering murmurs of solidarity. As the man continued to defend them, they felt a blend of disbelief and gratitude washing over them. "Maybe I'm not alone in this fight," Jordan mused, contemplating the shift from humiliation toward empowerment that was starting to take root. The weight of prejudice that had felt so immobilizing now felt somewhat lighter, a shift that could open doors to potential defiance against injustice. "Is it really happening?" Jordan murmured to themselves as they stepped onto the airplane, excitement and anxiety swirling like a double helix in their chest. They held tightly to their briefcase, the weight of the presentation pressing on their mind. This was more than just a flight, it was a career-defining moment. Today's the day, they whispered, recalling all the late nights of preparation. As they made their way to their assigned seat, Jordan offered a polite smile to the first-class passengers, bracing for the journey ahead. They settled in, glancing at the notes one last time. But even amidst the thrill, a flicker of doubt surfaced. What if my ideas aren't good enough? Between their thoughts, memories flooded back, images of childhood that played like an old film. They saw themselves in school, already aware of the barriers. "You're not really one of us," a voice had sneered at recess, echoing through their mind. Those words cut deeper than any cut could. Each moment of adversity became a stepping stone, cultivating the resilience that pushed them to this point. "I can overcome this," Jordan thought, remembering the lessons learned from those hard days. Every ounce of determination had shaped the person they were today. As the plane gained altitude, a familiar pressure settled in. It was more than just the weight of the briefcase, it was the expectations of their community, their family, the voices in their mind whispering, "You must succeed." Jordan felt the load grow heavier. "I'm not just representing myself," they reminded themselves, heart racing. With every passing moment, the hope of making a difference pulsed through them. "I have to prove my worth, not just to them, but to myself," they resolved, summoning all the bravery they could muster. The airplane became a microcosm, a tiny universe where a diverse spectrum of humanity coexisted in tight quarters. Jordan observed subtle dynamics forming, the quiet tension of status, the elitism seen in some passengers' dismissive expressions. The rich palette of humanity, filled with individuals, families, and aspirations, folded into one cramped space. Every seat tells a story, Jordan mused, pondering the journeys they all shared, yet sensing the chasms that separated them. Could they bridge this gap today? This thought lingered in the back of their mind as the plane ascended. As they settled into their seats, Jordan caught a glimpse of two first-class passengers sharing a laugh, their eyes occasionally darting toward those in coach with an air of superiority. Uncomfortable, Jordan shifted slightly, feeling an unsettling conflict arise. "Am I allowed to occupy this space?" they thought, more frustrated than ever. It gnawed at them as they reflected on the reasons they were there, the late nights, the sacrifices. Were they a valid presence, or merely a fleeting shadow? Their heart raced at the thought. With each passing minute, anticipation brewed, ignited by the impending presentation. Jordan's inner turmoil escalated, nervousness giving way to a determined resolve. "You belong here," they whispered to themselves, needing to hear the comforting words out loud. But the earlier doubts weighed heavily. As the flight progressed, the time to confront their fears drew closer. "This is it," they reminded themselves. Each breath in the cabin became a countdown to the ultimate challenge awaiting them. "Excuse me." Mrs. Smith called out, her voice sharp and commanding as she approached Jordan's seat. "I need to see your ticket again." Jordan, who had just settled in, looked up, instantly sensing the tension. "I showed it to you when I boarded. I have a first-class ticket." Mrs. Smith crossed her arms and leaned in, her gaze piercing. "First class is for passengers who can meet certain standards, and I just want to confirm that you qualify." Her tone dripped with condescension, emphasizing an invisible boundary that had been drawn. Every word felt like a spotlight shining directly on Jordan, casting doubt and judgment across the cabin. "What does that mean?" they thought, frustration boiling beneath the surface. It was clear this wasn't about the ticket, it was a systemic bias laid bare. Around them, a hush fell, the once lively cabin now a battleground of social norms and expectations. "Your outfit," Mrs. Smith continued, looking Jordan up and down. "It doesn't quite match the first-class vibe, does it?" Jordan's heart raced at her insinuation. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize clothes defined my worth," they shot back, voice tinged with defiance, but inside, they felt the weight of her prejudice crush down. "Oh, I just want to ensure we're following protocol," she claimed, but the skepticism in her eyes told a different story, a story of race, appearance, and privilege. "I've worked hard to be here," Jordan replied, trying to maintain composure while the humiliation washed over them. "I don't need your validation." An acknowledgement of their experience hung in the air, yet doubt still seeped into their thoughts. Did they truly belong among these passengers? Awkward glances swept through the cabin as fellow passengers reacted to the unfolding confrontation. Some intentionally turned away, pretending to be absorbed in their magazines, while others offered timid, sympathetic looks. "Wow, I can't believe this is happening," whispered a woman seated directly across from Jordan. Her friend beside her winced, unsure whether to engage or remain silent. Jordan felt a wave of isolation wash over them. Why was no one stepping in? The dim flicker of empathy was overshadowed by the harsh reality of indifference. As Mrs. Smith continued her interrogation, one older gentleman cleared his throat, attempting to muster the courage to speak. "Perhaps we should all be treated equally," he suggested, but his voice barely rose above the tension. Inside, Jordan wrestled with swirling emotions. The sense of powerlessness mixed violently with anger and disappointment. This isn't right, they thought, longing to reclaim a sense of dignity. They felt the humiliation settle into their chest like a stone, weighing them down. How can I stand up to this? The desire to assert their identity clashed with the fear of further degradation. "Just breathe," Jordan whispered to themselves, trying to gather strength amidst the chaos. But the emotional toll was undeniable, a tempest brewing inside them as they fought to maintain a semblance of calm. The cabin was poised on a knife's edge, and as the whirlwind of prejudice attacked their spirit, Jordan knew that something had to change, inside them and around them. "Get up!" Mrs. Smith shouted, her voice slicing through the cabin's hum, drawing every gaze to Jordan. "You don't belong in first class." Jordan's heart raced, the blood pounding in their ears. "I have a first-class ticket," they responded, trying to keep their voice steady. "Prove it," she challenged, arms crossed defiantly. "You're just taking up space that someone more deserving could use." Gasps echoed through the cabin as the weight of her words struck Jordan like a physical blow. "I didn't think this was how it would feel," they thought, overwhelmed by the acute awareness that every stranger's eyes were glued to them. "I'm not going anywhere," Jordan asserted, feeling an adrenaline surge. "You can't treat me this way." But Mrs. Smith remained unyielding, her demeanor embodying the systemic biases woven into the fabric of society. As passengers shifted in their seats, Jordan felt the reality of what was happening sink in. This wasn't merely a confrontation, it was a manifestation of deeper societal issues laid bare. The tension in the cabin thickened, and Jordan became painfully aware of the collective gaze of strangers burning into their skin. The whispers, murmurs, and shifting bodies served to amplify feelings of shame and vulnerability, making them feel more isolated. "Why is she doing this?" one passenger murmured, but Jordan couldn't catch their eye. Instead, it felt like they were slipping into an abyss of humiliation. "I'm just trying to exist, to be here." The spotlight on them felt blinding. "I am more than what she sees," Jordan thought, grappling with a cocktail of emotions, anger at Mrs. Smith, frustration with bystanders, and despair at the reality of racial injustice. Each tick of the clock felt like a countdown to an inevitable defeat. Why aren't they helping? The rising tide of shame threatened to overwhelm them as they clung to the thin thread of dignity stretched dangerously taut. Around them, reactions varied. Some passengers sat frozen, disbelief etched on their faces, while others nonchalantly pulled out their phones, recording the spectacle as if it were entertainment. "What a mess," one man said, shaking his head, yet not intervening. A woman offered a sympathetic glance but quickly turned away, avoiding the conflict entirely. Is anyone going to do something? Jordan thought, a swell of frustration rising within. The divisiveness was palpable, some whispered support while others chose silence, encapsulating the reality of passive indifference in moments of injustice. As Mrs. Smith pressed harder, her voice unwavering, the indifference of those around felt like a betrayal, intensifying the isolation that enveloped Jordan. This is not just about me, they thought, their resolve beginning to crystallize amidst the shame. Jordan grappled with a tumult of emotions. Each demeaning word from Mrs. Smith felt like a stab, leaving them confronting a tide of betrayal and humiliation. How did it come to this, they wondered, the emotional toll weighing heavily on their spirit. The gravity of being publicly called out, judged solely by their appearance, was overwhelming. No one should have to endure this, they thought, feeling principles of dignity challenged in a brief, harrowing moment. Why am I being put on display, they pondered, the anger bubbling beneath the surface unable to be released. With every heartbeat, the feeling of powerlessness grew more intense. As the humiliation mounted, Jordan fought hard to maintain composure, battling tears that burned in the corners of their eyes. Stay strong, they whispered under their breath, a mantra against the turmoil. Crying won't fix this, they reasoned, wrestling with the harsh realization that the world outside this cabin often reinforces such injustices. But I can't let them see me break. Each attempt to hold back the tears felt like a fight against the tide of racism that sought to drain their spirit, a struggle to assert their rightful place in a space where they belonged. Determination met despair in a turbulent dance. Just then, a crack in the tension emerged. The frustration experienced by the passengers began to seep through the silence, bubbling to the surface. "This is ridiculous," shouted a voice from the back, breaking the calm. Jordan's heart surged with a glimmer of hope. Will they stand up too? They looked around, searching for solidarity amidst the crowd. Murmurs of agreement began to swell, coursing through the cabin as more passengers found the courage to speak up. "This isn't right," someone else exclaimed, and Jordan realized a shift was starting, a collective awakening to the injustice that had unfolded. The atmosphere began to change, the potential for action hanging in the air like an unbroken promise. "Stop right there." Alex's voice rang out, drawing everyone's attention as they stood up, eyes glaring at Mrs. Smith. "You can't treat them like this." "Excuse me?" Mrs. Smith responded, stunned that anyone would dare challenge her authority. "This is none of your business." "It is my business when I see someone being treated unfairly," Alex shot back, defiance coursing through their words. They continued, "I've been watching this unfold, and it's absolutely unacceptable." Jordan felt their hearts swell. Someone was finally speaking up. Who is Alex, they wondered, but one glance at Alex's unwavering expression revealed a kindred spirit. "I've seen this before," Alex continued, their voice steady and firm. "The prejudice, the judgment based on nothing but appearance. It's wrong, and it needs to stop." The tension in the air sharpened as other passengers turned their focus toward Alex, intrigued and supportive. "I come from a community where we fight every day just to be seen," Alex recounted passionately. "I remember my first job, walking in and instantly being judged by my name and the color of my skin." Jordan listened intently, feeling Alex's words resonate deeply. The flight attendant's smirk faltered slightly as murmurs of agreement started to ripple through the cabin. "This isn't just about today, it's about all of us standing against discrimination in any form," Alex proclaimed, eyes scanning the audience. "This is systemic, and we all need to call it out." Passengers began nodding and whispering to each other, their collective empathy for Jordan growing stronger. Mrs. Smith looked around, struggling to maintain her composure as the tide began to turn against her. "You don't understand how things work here," she barked, attempting to regain control. "But we understand how to treat people with respect," a middle-aged woman responded firmly from her seat. "And we will not condone this behavior." The murmurs of support continued to grow, the energy shifting palpably as the passengers united against the oppression that had been thrust upon Jordan. The cracks in Mrs. Smith's authority widened, confusion coloring her features. "This isn't right," someone shouted, emboldening others to join in the dissent. Those once passive were now an echoing wall of solidarity, and Mrs. Smith's grip on the situation began to wane. With every passing moment, a sense of unity blossomed among the passengers. The casual conversations that had previously filled the cabin faded into silence, replaced by an unmistakable solidarity against the injustice unfolding. A young man in the back clapped his hands together, sparking others to join in, their applause resonating with encouragement. "We stand with you," he shouted, and the words reverberated through the space. The atmosphere transformed. What once felt heavy and isolating now sparkled with hope and togetherness. Jordan felt the swell of support lifting their spirits, transforming their feelings of helplessness into a flicker of hope. Finally, Jordan thought, "I'm not alone in this fight." They took a deep breath, allowing the growing confidence around them to fuel their resilience, sensing that change was not just possible, but imperative. Suddenly, a calm but firm voice broke through the tension. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" A figure in a sharp suit rushed toward them, an airline manager who had been alerted about the escalating conflict. "Sir, this passenger is in the wrong seat," Mrs. Smith snapped, gesturing toward Jordan with disdain. "I can assure you that I have a first-class ticket," Jordan replied, feeling a spark of defiance despite the weight of scrutiny. The manager, looking between Mrs. Smith and Jordan, raised an eyebrow. "I've received reports that suggest otherwise. I'm here to make sure that every passenger is treated with respect, regardless of their background." The cabin grew quieter, anticipation palpable. "I won't allow any discrimination on my flight," the manager continued, locking eyes with Mrs. Smith. "You need to provide a valid explanation for your conduct." Jordan felt relief wash over them as the tide began to turn. Finally, someone is standing up for what's right, they thought, gripping the armrest as a mixture of hope and adrenaline coursed through their veins. "Do you think this is acceptable?" the manager pressed, his voice firm yet measured as he confronted Mrs. Smith. "Our role is to serve our passengers, not to judge them." Mrs. Smith shifted uncomfortably, her earlier confidence wavering. "I was just enforcing policy. I didn't mean what?" the manager interrupted, drawing attention to the crowd. "To invoke bias and prejudice?" He turned to the passengers. "Let's be clear, we have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination in any form." Jordan felt a rush of empowerment and vindication. Their heart thrummed with each rebuke Mrs. Smith faced. The humiliation they had endured was now transforming into a sense of justice. "Is anyone else here prepared to stand up against this kind of treatment?" the manager asked, challenging the passengers to voice their thoughts, signaling a shift in authority. As the confrontation unfolded, Mrs. Smith faltered under the weight of accountability. Jordan noticed the tension dissolving as the manager's words resonated with everyone in the cabin. "I've been humiliated." Jordan couldn't help but yell, their voice strong, fueled by the backing of their fellow passengers. "This is not just about a seat, it's about integrity and respect." Witnessing Mrs. Smith's authority dissolve felt liberating, turning their feeling of powerlessness into something powerful. Accountability was taking place right in front of them, and Jordan's confidence surged as they realized that change was within reach. "Thanks for finally doing your job," Jordan added, finding their voice in the moment of truth. As the incident came to a head, someone in the back recorded the entire scene on their phone. Almost instantly, it went viral, capturing not just the confrontation but the widespread support that followed. Social media exploded with hashtags like #JusticeInTheAir and #StandWithJordan. Discussions about racial discrimination in public spaces saw a resurgence, creating a movement that gained momentum quickly. Jordan's story was being shared far beyond the confines of the airplane, shaping narratives and igniting conversations about equality and respect in the aviation industry. With emotions still running high, Jordan seized the moment. "Everyone here today witnessed how easy it is to remain silent," they began, looking around the cabin, their voice filled with passion. "But we all have the power to speak up and demand change." Turning to the camera, Jordan continued, "Your voice matters in this fight against injustice. We can create a world where everyone is valued and respected. Together, we can drive change. Don't let moments like this pass without speaking out." The atmosphere pulsed with energy, a sense of unity enveloping everyone. "Now it's your turn," Jordan said, looking directly into the camera, their voice steady but filled with emotion. I want to invite each of you to share your experiences with racism in the comments below. Your stories matter. Together, we can create a space where everyone feels seen and heard. They took a deep breath, remembering the support they had received. It's time to foster community and connection. We have the power to uplift one another. Jordan's heart raced as they recognized the importance of those conversations, knowing they could spark change and healing. This isn't just about one story, it's about uniting our voices against injustice, Jordan continued, their intensity rising. Every individual story contributes to the larger narrative of change we desperately need. They looked earnestly into the camera, determination shining through. By sharing your experiences, we build a community of strength and solidarity. Let's lift each other up, and show the world that together, we can make a real difference. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, Jordan urged, their urgency building. Every click helps amplify our voices and ensures that these critical conversations continue. They paused, allowing the weight of their words to resonate. Your engagement is pivotal in our quest for social justice. We need your support to bring impactful narratives to the forefront. Jordan leaned in closer, channeling all their energy into one powerful message. Remember, your voice matters, together, we can drive change. Stand up for what's right and let's turn our collective frustration into action. With a hopeful smile, they concluded, this is just the beginning. Let's continue this journey together.